Not since Hurricane Carol have southern New Englanders seen such a storm. At 2:45 this afternoon, the full force of Hurricane Bob slammed into Rhode Island with sustained winds of 115 miles per hour. Bob barreled up the coast of Rhode Island and southeastern Massachusetts, ripping boats from their moorings and trees from their roots. Power lines snapped like twigs from a tree. From Westerly to Wickford and Newport to New Bedford, residents battened down the hatches, headed for higher ground, and simply hoped for the best.
This is a Newswatch 10 special report, The Day of the Storm, with Doug White and Patrice Wood.
Good evening. Southern New England began preparing for Bob's arrival yesterday, but no amount of planning can fully protect against Mother Nature's fury.
Hurricane Bob was moving at 40 miles an hour when it hit Rhode Island with drenching rain and winds of 115 miles per hour. One of the areas hit first and hit hardest was Newport. Newswatch 10's Bob Ward has been in Newport all day, and he joins us live now. Bob.
Doug and Patrice, Hurricane Bob hit Newport head-on this morning, but it hit hard and moved on fast. And many believe that is what saved Newport from suffering any major widespread damage. Off Brenton Point, the tides of Hurricane Bob punished Newport's rocky coast. Each wave threatened to steal yet another piece of the city's famous Ocean Drive. And the hurricane came close to claiming Newport's trendy downtown. Bowen's Wharf, including the Black Pearl restaurant, appeared most vulnerable. Floodwaters also overtook Castle Hill Cove. Normally, Coast Guard vessels are moored here, but thanks to Bob, someone's car almost needed a mooring. And look what Bob thought of all the yachts in Newport. Most helplessly danced to the music and the hurricane's ferocious winds. Some didn't even make it to the water. Downed power lines, split trees, flooded streets. Hurricane Bob has left much behind. Much that is now giving tourists something else to see in this tourist city and something else to talk about for years. We have also heard of great damage to Newport's first beach. Apparently, a tidal swell came up and washed away the beach house and lifehouse chairs. But other than that, we have only heard of minor damage, perhaps damage most likely referred to as fallen limbs, fallen telephone wires, that sort of thing. Individual houses have sustained some damage, but nothing that you really can call serious on a widespread basis. Reporting live from Newport, I'm Bob Ward. Doug and Patrice.
Okay, thank you very much, Bob Ward. New Bedford and the surrounding area also felt the full wrath of Hurricane Bob. New Bedford's hurricane barrier did pass its first real test, but still damage estimates on luxury yachts will probably run into the millions. Newswatch 10's Ken Malloy reports on that area.
2:30 p.m. Buzzards Bay is convulsing. Bob is here. Mighty trees sigh, they crack, they split, they fall in two and fall to the ground by the hundreds. Com Electric gives up on trying to keep the lines up.
Well, we're killing this area so no one gets hurt. There's just too many down power lines.
In the midst of this crazed crescendo, two people wander into the surf. They later emerge unharmed. The eye of the storm passes over New Bedford. Residents emerge first looking skyward, then surveying the damage. Amidst all the destruction, there have been no serious injuries. That is, unless you count sailboats. It's hard to imagine the kind of force that wind and waves can bring to bear on a boat like this one behind me, but just imagine at one point it was moored over here, but it was lifted up onto this causeway and dumped right there. The brunt of the storm passes New Bedford. The power is still out in some places. The shelters are now empty. The damage is being surveyed, categorized, and looked at with a strange sense of wonder. A rainbow gives a signal that all is clear. The anatomy of a dying hurricane. In New Bedford, Ken Malloy, Newswatch 10.
While those were some of the communities hardest hit, virtually no place escaped unscathed.
When we come back, we'll show you how Bob left communities from the East Bay to Westerly.
The coastal communities, of course, took the brunt of today's storm.
Newswatch 10's Jody Kennedy has been traveling from Narragansett to Wickford assessing the situation. She's live now in North Kingstown with the story from those areas. What can you tell us, Jody?
Hi, Patrice and Doug. Residents didn't waste any time preparing this morning for Hurricane Bob. Some coastline residents took the evacuation request very seriously. In fact, some of the old-timers down here were expecting the worst based on their experience in previous hurricanes. And some people tonight are saying maybe they were right. Once Bob reached South County, those who weren't prepared were sorry. Boats bobbed up and down like corks at Bonnet Shores. Bob hit Narragansett hard. Waves tossed chunks of the Narragansett Town Beach parking lot around like beach balls. The boarded-up Coast Guard house was no match for Bob's strength.
The wave just came in, smashed the boards off like it was tissue paper. The waves were busted. The whole restaurant was filled with water. And then within about 15 to 20 minutes, the whole wall got taken out.
In North Kingstown, trees were down everywhere. Some broke in half, others uprooted. Some took their toll on homes and power lines. Robert Kosenska, who was evacuated from his home, saw this utility pole go down.
It just, I don't know, this is pretty scary to begin with. You know, the wind and everything.
Now, Patrice and Doug, quite a few people are coming out of their homes tonight, taking down the boards, assessing the damage. We have several people who are beginning to cut the trees that are in the road. There are several trees, as we mentioned in the package, several trees in the roads. People are cutting them, trying to make paths back to their homes. And quite a few people are very thankful this evening because it could have been a lot worse. Patrice and Doug.
Okay, thank you, Jody.
Thank you, Jody. Throughout the area, the storm brought differing effects. While everybody felt and saw some portion of Hurricane Bob, some communities may have suffered less damage than others.
Newswatch 10's Mark Anik reports from Westerly, where some people say they and their community were very lucky.
The waves were saying Bob is here, the high surf announcing his arrival, the storm making roads suitable for boat traffic only. Bob turned trees into roadblocks and tree limbs into torches. More evidence of just how much damage this storm is doing. We're standing on a cart path which is supposed to take us to the 12th tee here at the Woonsocket Club. Well, the 12th tee is over there by that fence that you see. In between tee and green now is one rather large water hazard. Bob sent some people running for the shelters. At the Westerly High School, some were waiting and playing. Some were waiting and worrying.
I'm going to look to stay here all year round if my house is still there when I get back.
Others refused to leave, no matter who was asking.
Well, I've asked.
These ladies weren't worrying about the storm, only that they needed a fourth for bridge.
Yes, we do. Do either one of you play?
Bridge?
Yes.
No. Would you like to teach us? They would use their humor to ride it out, to survive the wind and the rain. When it was over, there was damage, but neighbors saw less of it than they had expected.
Just like a bad storm. I'm not excited or upset. We were lucky, very lucky.
Indeed, they were lucky, for when the sun came up after the storm, it showed that another sun had fallen, but also that nature would someday make things beautiful again. Mark Anik, Newswatch 10, Westerly.
Police in Westerly are still keeping property owners from returning to their homes along the beaches. They plan to issue passes tomorrow morning, beginning at 8 a.m.
Hurricane Bob left a bad impression on several East Bay, Rhode Island communities and Massachusetts cities and towns as well. Newswatch 10's Laura Lucas has this report.
When it came to the East Bay and southern Massachusetts, Bob showed he has a real attitude problem. For one thing, he has no respect for trees, no matter if they are tall and stately. He doesn't much like boats either. The fear that Bob would have no respect for people drove many residents of low-lying areas to shelters. 86 patients from the Grace Barker Nursing Home in Warren went to the local high school for the day. So did about 150 residents of Swansea.
They said that this was a more dangerous hurricane than the last one, and we're so close to the water, it's supposed to hit at high tide. So I just decided to take the kids and go.
No, we just brought magazines, newspapers, and TV, and just things to do, that's all. Should have brought a bottle of wine, actually.
I usually stay there and ride it out, but this time I was scared.
What scared you?
I don't know, the way they said it was going to be 120-mile-an-hour wind, and then how high the water was going to get, so I left. Hopefully, it's still there when I get back.
Streets are another thing Bob has a bad attitude towards. He blocked them with downed power lines. He stripped them of traffic lights. And he flooded them. Here in Bristol, some boats were damaged. Some people had to be rescued from cars that were stalled in flooding. And everywhere you look, Bob took out his fury on the trees. Laurel Lucas, Newswatch 10, Bristol.
Hurricane Bob left its very angry mark on the West Bay as well. High winds shattered windows on Main Street in East Greenwich, and local boat owners saw their craft tossed like toys. Residential areas are littered with downed tree limbs, which block streets and damaged homes. Some came home to find things not exactly the way they left it. Along with the bad news, there was some good. Some said they expected things to be a lot worse.
When we come back, we'll take a look at the hurricane's path that brought us the day of the storm.
And the first real test for the Fox Point hurricane barrier. A look at how it fared.
Governor Bruce Sunderland is now out visiting statewide, assessing the storm's damage.
Newswatch 10's Jim Tarracani has been at the State House all day with the governor. He's live there now with the latest on road closures, evacuations, and power outages. Jim?
Well, Patrice and Doug, as you said, the governor is still out on the road assessing the damage that Hurricane Bob brought to the state. This has been a beehive of activity all day, way down below me, 3 floors below me in the sub-basement. The Emergency Management Agency, the people down there, still hard at work gathering information. With me is the governor's able #2 man who actually got everything rolling as far as the emergency procedures, Lieutenant Governor Roger Beejan, who issued the executive order last night at 11 o'clock to get things underway here. He has been here all day. And Lieutenant Governor, first of all, thanks for joining us. And can you tell us right now, what is the status of power outages the way you understand it in the state?
Well, there have been extensive power outages throughout the state. All regions of the state have been affected. We had the head of the Public Utilities Commission, Jim Malachowski, was with us last evening and gave us an update as to how many crews they were going to have out working. As many crews as were possible from all the utility companies, anticipating that there were going to be fallen trees, poles, wires severed. They were going to deploy those resources immediately, and if necessary, and I think necessary is the case, they're going to be bringing crews in from out of state to help out.
Your best guess as to when most people in the state can have their power back?
That's a tough question. I think it could be a matter of a couple of days, but I don't want to be held to that. I know that they are working very vigorously, and I know the phones have been ringing off the hook for people calling for power. They are aware of it, and they are certainly working as vigorously as they can.
Now, I understand the state is in line for federal assistance. The governor has written to the President of the United States to ask for such assistance. What is the status of that, and can we expect it immediately?
As we speak, the governor is out assessing the situation, as I think you reported, and he has accompanying him someone from Washington who flew in this evening. That person from the FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, is in town. Tomorrow we're going to go out again and assess the situation, and it is our hope that there will be a declaration of a disaster area. That will make the state of Rhode Island eligible for a variety of things, including substantial loans from the federal government, a 75-25 matching grants from the federal government.
And one last thing, I guess this would be important. Is the state open tomorrow for all practical purposes, banks, state employees, and whatnot?
Yes. However, the only thing that will be an impediment to the normal course of business is, of course, those trees and poles that may still be down in those areas where, because of power outages, may interrupt business. But other than that, and I don't want to minimize that, there will be it is not anticipated that there will be any other interruption of business.
Lieutenant Governor, thanks very much for joining us. We were talking with Lieutenant Governor Roger Beejan. As we said, the governor is still out assessing the damage. We'll have complete details of his assessment for the 11 o'clock News Watch. Doug and Patrice?
Jim, during the governor's 5 o'clock news conference, he mentioned that Governor Cuomo of New York had offered to send in some work crews. Do you know if those folks are on the way? Are those men on the way to Rhode Island yet?
We don't know if they're on the way. I think what the governor said, he took the phone call from Governor Cuomo, and he said he would be getting back to Governor Cuomo, and the governor from New York offered any assistance he could give, and that would come immediately if our governor requested.
Very neighborly. Okay.
Very neighborly.
Thanks, Jim. City of Providence, meanwhile, remains literally closed in the wake of Hurricane Bob. Driving in the city is illegal technically at this hour due to the danger of downed tree limbs and power lines. Newswatch 10's Martin Morenz has a look at how Rhode Island's largest city weathered the storm.
In the wake of Hurricane Bob, Providence is a maze of downed trees and power lines. The city is still closed down.
We will be assigning police officers on a priority basis to those areas where there are wires down. We'll have to wait to announce the reopening of the city because it still is not safe to travel.
60-mile-an-hour wind gusts snapped trees and bent signs. Roads are blocked in many parts of Providence this evening. Live wires are the main concern.
That tree came over, and that's when we lost the power.
And these wires are still live?
Yes, they are still live, and there have been some people who obviously have been playing with the wires, which we weren't real excited about seeing. But
hey, those wires are live in there, too.
Not a good idea to walk in the water.
Not a good idea, no.
The Providence hurricane barrier passed its first real test. At high tide, areas outside of the barrier were flooded. But 2 of 5 huge pumps operating at the hurricane barrier pump station kept the downtown dry. Floodwaters were pumped out at around 1 million gallons a minute.
I think the change in this storm over last storms that we've had is the fact that we closed the city, number one, and number two, we had the hurricane barrier.
This 2-family house on Public Street in Providence was set for demolition. Hurricane Bob took care of that. Martin Morenz, Newswatch 10, Providence.
Incidentally, in Providence, to report trees that are down, Providence residents can call the City Forestry Department. The telephone number there on your screen, 785-9450.
Forecasters began watching Bob closely even before it was called Bob, back when it was just a tropical depression east of the Bahamas.
That was early last Friday morning, and meteorologist Gary Lay has been tracking the storm for us ever since then, and now Gary can breathe a little bit more easily. He looks back over his shoulder at the path Bob took to land right at our doorstep today. Gary.
That's right, Doug, and even looking at Bob, before it was a depression, as just a cluster of showers and thunder showers in the Bahamas. Bob indeed became a depression on Friday morning, early in the morning at about 2 a.m. It tracked off toward the northwest very slowly, becoming a tropical storm at noon on Friday, and then reached hurricane strength at 6 p.m. on Saturday. Notice it moved only this far. It was moving along at about 6, 7, 8 miles an hour, and for a while off the southeast coast as a hurricane. It almost stopped and became nearly stationary. Then the storm began to renew its track off toward the north and northeast, bending just around Cape Hatteras, coming across Block Island and making landfall, mainland landfall at Newport at around 2:30 this afternoon, and now the storm continues moving off to the northeast. Now let's pick it up on the satellite picture right about there when it became the hurricane. You can see the storm just off the South Carolina coast, moving toward the north at this time. Watch the eye begin to appear right about there. There it is. And now I'm going to pause the picture in this position because that's where it was strongest. It continues to move across the area and now up into the Gulf of Maine. At its maximum intensity just east-northeast of Norfolk, Virginia, it was a Category 3 hurricane, 115 miles per hour and 28.05 inches on the barometer, and it weakened ever so slowly as it continued to move across Block Island, across Newport, and then just about across the Boston area as it headed out toward Maine. Again, the storm had a major difference depending which side of the storm you were on. I should say you've noticed a major difference. If you were on this side of the storm, you had a lot of rain, especially in the northwestern part of the state. The winds weren't quite as strong in Westerly as they were in Newport, for example, over to New Bedford and the Jamestown area, which were particularly hard hit. They were on the bad side of the storm. The final tally, in quotes, because nothing's final yet, but the storm surge lower bay was 7 feet, 8.5 feet by the hurricane barrier, 2 to 8 inches of rain, 63-mile-an-hour wind gust at Greene, 75 Westerly, 82 at Newport, 100 in West Warwick, and 105 on Block Island. That was measured, but that was the top end of the anemometer that measures that. There were actually reports of 120-mile-an-hour winds on Block Island. Doug, Patrice?
Okay, thanks a lot, Gary. Hurricane Bob is one of the worst storms southern New England has seen in a very long time.
But there were others. When we come back, a brief history of hurricanes in our area.
Over time, southern New Englanders have come to respect the great power of Mother Nature, and that's why we're all seasoned survivors.
Newswatch 10's Kathy Ray takes a look at some hurricanes of the past and says experience and newer technology have proven to be lifesavers, as they were today battling Hurricane Bob.
August 1954, Hurricane Carol careens up the mouth of Narragansett Bay and shows the state no sympathy. By the time Carol had her way, 16 were dead and damage tallied $200 million. Just 1 year later, 2 deadly storms spawn in the Atlantic, Connie and Diane. Streets turned to rivers, and when the hurricanes finally cleared, 200 people had died. Damage here, more than $800 million. In 1985, Hurricane Gloria, a Category 1 storm, swept through the Ocean State, and people by now were prepared. Bob, in comparison, was a stronger storm than Gloria, a Category 3 with sustained winds of more than 115 miles per hour, thundering across the region. But again, southern New Englanders know when it's time to get serious. From the time the hurricane warning was issued yesterday, residents knew what to do: secure the boats, board the windows, buy batteries, fresh water, and evacuate all low-lying areas. And for the first time, jaws of steel served to cradle the city of Providence as the hurricane barrier got its first real test. Experience and technology. Add those together and hopefully the tragedies of the past will never be repeated. Kathy Ray, Newswatch 10.
Of course, all of the storms this area has seen are compared to the hurricane of 1938. The 53rd anniversary of that storm is just 2 days away. In 38, 262 people were killed, 109 of those in the communities of Westerly and Charlestown. In Providence, the tidal wave flooded the area to a depth of nearly 14 feet. And that does it for this special report on Hurricane Bob.
We'll see you later tonight at 11 when the Newswatch continues. Hope you have a nice evening.
Good night.